I was tasked with doubling my sales team, but no one knew how we were going to get to those numbers. That's when, before I hired 10 more reps, I need RevOps to then help me identify what are these territories, how are we getting the leads, are these goals attainable, how can we hold each other accountable across the organization.
All right, Michelle, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we kind of dive into today's topic, why don't we go ahead and tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. My background is building out early stage sales teams from the ground up. Most of my experience came from Datadog, where I built the sales team from 3 to 100 over the course of 4 years. Went to Drift to do the same thing, and then Dooley. So I've seen multiple different stages of growth through scale and focusing on that go-to-market builds to see repeatable success. And then a few years ago, my business partner, Niche, which we worked together at Drift, he came to me and said, "You're consulting and advising, I'm consulting and advising. Let's do our own thing, but for many early stage startups." And then we pulled in Sean Lane, our head of operations, to add that third leg of the stool. So right now we work with early stage companies to help them build out that go-to-market function to see repeatable success as they scale. We tackle a number of different projects, and it's been really exciting over the past almost 3 years.
Yeah, and shout out to Sean, a two-time guest on the podcast and a mutual acquaintance who actually I think put us in touch. So thanks for that, Sean. Um, and I think being having the opportunity to work with companies at an early stage to kind of get RevOps in place, build them to scale is probably more important today than ever. Um, but I think one of the things you and I were talking about offline um, is this challenge of being able to have realistic expectations for um, for revenue operations, like not setting kind of outlandish goals, or to really kind of ensure that expectations are and goals and are realistic and can be actually solved, and kind of setting people up for success in that. So maybe you can give a little bit of context around the challenge as you've seen it in the market, where their expectations are kind of outside the scope of realism.
Yeah, absolutely. Early stage, coming in as a first time sales leader, typically when there's less than 15 people, you get that round of funding, whether it's seed A or B, and then your board and investors, your C level, they want to see, quadruple the revenue over the next year. And we're working with a lot of our clients right now on that. Um, and we don't have RevOps at that point. So RevOps plays a really, really important role, especially early on, to break down those silos and improve the forecasting and the overall accountability on the team, and really just bringing the reality to the table around what is a realistic goal. And most people are just operating independently on that go to market team early on, trying to figure out how you're going to get to, 3, 4x of that revenue target because your CEO just told you to do that. But RevOps, if you hire them early enough, they bring that collaboration really early on, which makes it successful, and they're able to help the overall organization identify how they're going to get to those outrageous targets, or they'll bring some light to the end of the tunnel and say, this is not how we're not going to get there, but let's look at the overall playbook and how we can get there from a revenue or metric standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's an interesting kind of paradox because RevOps is the thing that generally allows you to have those more realistic projections and ways to an idea of where to go and how to get there. Um, and so without it in place, it does become a little bit of a guessing game. So it's like chicken or egg. Do you kind of set those expectations first, or do you first make sure that you have RevOps in place? But I'm interested from the perspective that you sit, kind of working with a whole bunch of different companies, earlier stage companies, founders. Have you seen those expectations change and shift over the last few years? And if you have, what has been kind of the nature of that change?
Yeah, absolutely. So RevOps and it has been a title that most people don't really know what they do. And when they hire RevOps, they really do add a different level of expertise in the org, especially when it comes to bringing those different types of individuals together from a marketing standpoint, from a product standpoint, and sales in order to see rapid growth. And they'll help you overcome those scaling challenges. What happens now in today's world, there's a lot of disjointed communication and misalignment between the revenue driving teams because everyone wants to go this way. Everyone has a different opinion on named account strategy or this tool, that tool. And with everything that's coming out with AI and less hiring, but more revenue needs, RevOps comes into play there. And they're really just the ultimate backbone of the revenue focused organization. And it's not necessarily about like driving efficiency across the team. It's really about fostering alignment and empowering those teams to see that sustainable growth. And that is where I see RevOps really putting more of a focus over the next several years is really helping that org see that sustainable growth over these challenges and changes that are coming in the market.
Yeah, and I think we are in a time when there's kind of the expectation of do more with less. We were in a phase that was growth at all costs, that shifted to scalable growth or efficient growth, and how looking for ways to do that, to create efficiencies, um, be that alignment being part of it. But as you said, there's all sorts of technological disruption happening in our world, um, and I'm interested when it comes to you brought up AI. Um, when it comes to tools like that, do you find that your conversations, maybe early on in your relationship with customers, shift where there's more kind of like, okay, we want to do everything with an AI agent or something? Has that expectation come up yet, or has it still been kind of tempered?
You know, it varies on the organization. I will say some of them are afraid to have their employees use AI and use AI tools, especially as they're scaling and growing the team. They don't want any of their data out there. They want the team to be more genuine and personalized in their approaches. So when they're looking at, an AI tool or AI chat, they're a little bit hesitant. And we like to get them to think about how they can be more efficient. So, for example, RevOps, they'll look at the success of the sales team or the BDRs and identify that they're not working as fast as they should. So, what tools can we put in front of them to make them more efficient, as well as more efficient and just get to where they need to be faster without without all the guesswork that is typically at early stage, right? Like, what is the value proposition? What is the ICP? You could use AI and tools to help you get there a lot faster.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you're seeing that, because it's been my experience that kind of the larger or more established a company is, the greater the hesitancy is. And I kind of chalk that up to there's more to lose reputationally. So um, I would, I guess the inverse isn't necessarily true, that the smaller and earlier on a company is, the more comfortable they are taking those risks, which is an interesting kind of phenomenon to maybe explore in a further episode. But um, when you're working with a new customer, let's say, or a new client, early stage company, and you want to get them kind of on the road to sustainable growth which is kind of the expectation today. What's the roadmap? Like, how are things set up to create that sustainability, and how are, the expectations that's going to be put on kind of the RevOps org aligned to kind of reality?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, what we specifically do, or Sean from a RevOps standpoint, and RevOps that I've hired very early on, they really focus on the impact that the company needs to have across all different teams in order to start to chip away at some of those major initiatives for the year. So, for example, implementing OKR framework, making sure that we have all of the data and tools in place in order for us to understand what's working and what's not working. And then looking at the sales and revenue side, lead scoring, what tool sets do we need in order for the team to start to see some success from an outbound approach, what RevOps projects need to happen in order to impact on revenue, have that positive impact on revenue. So really starting at that OKR model right out of the gates. When I hired RevOps super early at one of my orgs, that was what we implemented because we were all working in many different directions, right? So products coming out with a big release, we don't know what products, what impact that's going to have on pipeline gen. We don't have pipeline gen. Marketing, what are you focusing on? Sales, what are you focusing on? RevOps comes in and implements an accountability across all parts of the org, especially at that C-level VP and down to the individual contributor level.
Yeah, accountability. I like that. But I would imagine not everybody loves accountability, right? So do you have some challenges, some hesitation from different parts of organizations, or generally? In my experience, there, at least in previous companies with sales, for example, they have a very set way of doing things, and they don't really want to change because they're in their flow, right? So you're adding this new thing. You say it may help, but in the short term it's going to take me longer, and I'm going to maybe miss my quota or something. So I mean, are those challenges there, and how do you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we see it when there hasn't been RevOps for quite some time. So then you have these really bad habits. And if you wait too long, then it will take 2 years to unpack those bad habits and then create those really good habits that need to happen, like an operating model, operating meetings that you all look at what's working and what's not working. It is better to just rip the band-aid off, knowing that it's going to take a little bit of time for the team to adopt the new motion, or these metrics that you're expecting them to be able to articulate back to the org about what's working, what's not working. I think that's where RevOps comes in. They need to be able to provide the org these agile metrics at any given point. Just pick three to start with, and just outline why it's super important for the team to adopt these. So improve operational efficiency, which will then lead you to build more pipeline, to close more revenue, to hit those targets and get to your quota. Versus we have no idea where we're running. We're just closing deals. We don't know how many leads marketing is going to bring to the table, and having those silos across the org.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think some people like their silos. They find them very comfy and warm.
Right. But in order to get to the next level, yeah, you can be comfy and warm. But are you going to get that next round of funding? Are you going to be acquired? Whatever your goals are, you need to be able to change. And that's where I think RevOps has helped me and the orgs that I've worked in really start to bring that to light and the importance of it.
Yeah. Um, so you talked a bit about hiring or bringing on a RevOps function early on, and that you've done it in your previous roles, and that that's kind of the focus in your current one. Um, how early are we talking? Is there some sort of threshold or marker that once you've crossed that, now it's time to implement RevOps, or is it the kind of thing where you'll only know that you should have done it 6 months too late?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the success of the company. Are you starting to see repeatability in revenue? Um, I was tasked with like doubling my sales team, but no one knew how we were going to get to those numbers. So that's when, before I hired 10 more reps, I need RevOps to then help me identify what are these territories, how are we getting the leads, are these goals attainable, how can we hold each other accountable across the organization, just not on the sales side. And at that point, it's usually just me building the dashboards and the reports, and everyone's using different spreadsheets and different tools, to track their own success. But when you get that, if you're going for that other round of funding, or you just got round of funding, or you need to hire, I think it's really important to identify that rev ops title and get them in there sooner than later, super early.
Um, I think one of the challenges that a lot of revenue folks that I've talked to over the last year and change doing this, that they talk about, that they experience, that their peers experience. You mentioned that RevOps is often ill-defined, vaguely defined, defined differently by different people. I know Sean, in that book you have over there, he talked about a solid definition, but the main challenge that comes up is that there is a natural tendency for a company that maybe didn't have RevOps before, or people in the company, to treat RevOps as a service function, as a CRM admin, as a person that creates a dashboard, as opposed to a strategic, proactive role where you kind of sit down and you kind of set the strategy for the go-to-market, and this is how we are going to break down the silos and align, and this is how we're going to have that predictability. Um, and so I would imagine that getting in early on is probably a good forcing function to ensure that that mentality doesn't kind of take hold. But this challenge about being strategic, being a kind of service function rather than strategic. How do you see that kind of broadly, and what are some ways that someone maybe in a role like that, who's starting to be pigeonholed to just kind of being an admin, how can maybe they break out of it?
I think I actually had to do that when I hired RevOps, to tell people what this person's role is. Okay, so they're not going to just tweak that one Salesforce report for you. That's not their role. I think being really open and outlining their specific goals and what their focus is on a day to day is super important right out of the gates. People think that RevOps will be that catch all for all of the issues that the organization has, but ultimately their goal is to really help streamline some of these issues that you have, and foster a unified focus across the overall org. And that's not busy work, like little admin tasks that some people have. um, then you build out another role for Salesforce admin, or uh, sales operations that focuses on building those dashboards. The RevOps for me is, I think of them as my partner in crime when it comes to scaling an efficient go-to-market org, and working very closely with C-level and all of the other department heads, whether with product and marketing, sales, CS, everyone that is also gold at the higher level as well. So I think it's really important to outline this is their job, and then everything else, RevOps is reported to me, so everything else would need to go through me if it does not align with um, the outline I gave you.
Yeah. So one of the um, interesting trends that I think I've observed, that other people have observed, you've probably observed as well, is that along with kind of this transition from growth at all costs, maybe a lot more leeway on budgets, we're in a world where every kind of sub department got their own kind of tool that they wanted to, whatever you wanted. It created this kind of tech debt bloat of connecting things. And we've come to a place where it seems like both, purchasing is being much more looked over, and there is a level of consolidation that seems to be happening. That a lot of those point solutions are now gone. And either you just got to make do with the consolidated tool if there's something you can do there, or you just got to figure it out on your own. Um, so I would say, one, have you seen that play out and does it exist in the startup world as well? And two, um, do you think that it creates a challenge, an opportunity, or both from a RevOps perspective?
Great question. Yes, we see it at all different levels um, across our customers. Less is more these days. So I think it does put a little bit of a challenge on the RevOps function because people are used to, let me buy this tool. I'm going to see a demo of this tool. And then next thing you know, you have that bloat. But now RevOps is pushing back and saying, what are you going to accomplish with this other tool when we have a free version of this that does the exact same thing as that tool? Um, where we push for less is more, to be honest, because change management is extremely difficult. And then what happens is it's pushed on RevOps. Well, RevOps, half my sales team isn't using that tool anymore, but I want to go buy this one. And guess who's going to do the research on it and implement it? The RevOps. So they're fighting that constant battle internally. I can speak really just for the sales team because they're hit up by different sales reps to demo this tool and that tool. But I think the new way is going to be less is more because of the lack of change management. They can only focus on so many things, right? So what's another tab? What's another tool going to do? Is it going to help generate revenue and how? I think there's going to be a lot more um, business cases that need to be sold internally across many different functions, not just RevOps in the future.
So I have this hunch, and I have yet to see it play out beyond kind of what I've been seeing and doing. But you know, I feel like this the ground has been seeded, because these point solutions are now more often than not no longer available to folks to meet their specific use case, and they either have to kind of potentially fit a square peg into a round hole of their CRM or whatever. That this leaves an opportunity for RevOps to create an incredible amount of value for their own role in the company by focusing on kind of bespoke internal tooling. And I think previously that was probably more of a bottleneck because RevOps is less of a developer. But in my experience, there are some AI tools out there now that have really shrunken the gap between someone who can think technically and someone who actually has the technical coding skills. So I mean, just as an example, I as kind of a whatever I kind of sit on both sides of growth, marketing, operations. I kind of sit across all of it. I've been doing a lot of this. Hey, we have a gap here, and we're not going to buy a tool for $30 a month to fit that gap. Um, I'm just going to kind of go on Claude or vo.dev or Cursor and create an internal tool, which I've done. And it's kind of not, you can't really tell the difference. Obviously, it's kind of taped together with duct tape in certain ways, but like it feels like that's the ultimate use case for RevOps to kind of be the hero. Do you see that as a potential near term future?
Absolutely. So you have a tool, there might be a small gap, but is there a workaround or is there a fix within that tool that you have today? Um, and if you do buy another tool for that $30 a month, is it going to actually be used in the capacity that the person internally is trying to sell you on? No, but will the band-aid approach that you can build that will do just fine and no one will actually notice the difference once they get used to using it? There's workarounds, and a lot of these tools, if you buy one, you have an API or there's a workaround or anything that you can find, it's there. So I suggest trying to think outside of the box and a little bit more creatively before you go spend another $15,000 a year when no one's half the team's going to use it.
Right. Yeah. I find it to be an incredibly exciting time because there's so much, the moat around knowledge from a technical perspective is it's been decreased a lot. Um, yeah, and it's not to say that every Joe and Jane out there can pull up ChatGPT and become a director of RevOps or a developer or whatever. But if you have that kind of systems thinking, if you kind of think things through in that technical way, um, you're really able to do a ton of stuff. Um, I'm interested, in the last few minutes that we have here. Um, we're in January of 2025, so early in the game. Who knows what will be in January 2026? Hopefully, we'll all still be here and healthy. But looking at through the lens, a very narrow lens of the go to market tech stack, the revenue organization. As we go through this year, where do you see kind of the potential? Um, maybe not black swan events, but the potential things that might uh, throw a wrench in kind of more rigid annual plans that have happened, where people should, need to kind of prepare to be a little bit more flexible.
I think what we're talking Yeah, I think what we just talked about, right? So, for example, we're looking at a lot of marketing funnels right now, or lack thereof, when it comes to their annual plan. How can I make my SDR team and a team more efficient with less is more? So getting really creative with some of the tools that are out there that are either free or AI. And I think that will blow some people's minds what is actually possible once they start to implement it. And it will take some time for individuals in the org to adopt it, but the success will be there. Um, we do it pretty often with some of the SDR teams that we work with. They didn't even think that some of the messaging and the techniques are possible. They're, manually going through some of their tasks throughout the day. But if you take the time to get a little creative and start to think outside the box how you can be more efficient, I think in the next several months you'll start to see people, uh, SDRs or AEs who are doing, I'm just using outbound prospecting as an example. It's top of mind for me right now, but doing that become a lot more efficient and successful compared to what you've seen in the last several years, just with what is out there today. And when you're looking at your annual plan, how are we going to get there? You'll look back and see the small changes you made, um, by thinking outside of the box and getting creative. And in June, wow, look at we were able to accomplish this outrageous number from a marketing standpoint with the small team being more efficient using free tools or AI.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to put a pin on it. Hopefully, we all in June will be able to have that conversation. That would be great. That would be ideal. Michelle, before we say goodbye, maybe is there anywhere that the folks at home can go to learn more about what you're doing, what the folks you and the rest of your team are doing? Website, LinkedIn, something like that.
Yeah, we're at beacongtm.com and I'm on LinkedIn as Michelle Pietsch, Beacon GTM. So feel free to reach out.
All right, and we'll put that in the show notes. With that, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully, maybe in June or January of next year, we can have a follow up and kind of see where things played out in some of the predictions.